So, like I said, today is going to be a little bit different. I am working on, so my good friend Julie posted pictures the other day of her and her daughter, who is Hazel's friend, and they're about the same age. They made a fairy house in their garden in the backyard. And so I was like, that's a great idea. I was like, was that 3D printed? And she was like, no, but that would be a good idea. So then, of course, I decided to go and work on a fairy garden. So I have a whole bunch of 3D models of D&D miniature stuff. Shocking, I know. And so I found there's one of the sets that I have has this cool door and entryway. So it's actually pretty cool. These just go in here. And then this goes on here. And like, you know, it's intended to print out like a whole dungeon or whatever. I think this is actually the front door to like a tower, this particular set. And then it has like a whole thing with the keep and crenellations and all that stuff. But for just a door, bang. So it doesn't open all the way, but that's, you know, it doesn't need to because there's not, spoiler alert, there's not going to be real fairies living in the fairy house. But so there's that. And I did some base painting on this. I did a couple of, see if you can kind of see it. Yeah. So if I hold it this way, I did kind of a brick color and I sprayed it from the bottom up on all the pieces, except for the doors. The doors are totally covered. And then I did from the top down, I did kind of a mossy green color to make it look like there's kind of moss. So it almost looks like a color shift, but it's not. So that's part one of the fairy house, and I'm going to work on weathering this up. And then what I'm going to do in addition to that is I busted out. So I have, let's see, because of course I do. I have, I'm going to put this right here. This is only one bin of all the stuff I have, but I have all this stuff for making dioramas, because I used to make dioramas a lot with Gundam model kits. So of course I still have a ton of supplies like this stuff, grass, dark green grass, burnt grass, snow, all the things, light green, fake trees. I have talus, which is rock debris, it says right there, in multiple sizes, because, you know, you can't have just one size if you want it to look realistic like an avalanche or something. I even have this easy water stuff, which I never actually use, and I really want to actually try it for some prop making. But it's these pellets, and you melt them, you heat them, and they melt, and then you pour it like water, and then as it cools, it hardens, and so you can get like realistic water effects because they dry when they melt and they're like translucent. Yeah, exactly. Let's do it. I have. You can whatever. I have the stuff for whatever landscape you want. Like I said, you know, coarse turf. I have, I mean, just every color imaginable. I even have like tall grass that you like cut to length. I have it all. So, but this is all the stuff that I'm not using because I already picked out the stuff that I am going to use. Ugh. Or at least that I'm maybe going to use. I have a good selection over here off screen, kind of, but everything down to like fine soil turf, medium green grass, you know, a little bit of earth, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of goodies. But so everybody who 3D prints knows what these are, and you have a bajillion of them laying around after a while, and you're always like, what do I do with these things? So I had this idea like a month ago and haven't had a chance to implement it yet, but it turns out that this idea that I had perfectly syncs with this other project. So my idea was, so we're talking about making a garden, which is what the fairy house is for. And a problem with any plants, right? Anybody who has planted anything knows a big problem is always like weeds and weed barrier and keeping weeds away from your plants, right? Well, so I had the idea. There's a hole here, and there's plastic all around it. So, got some plants. Boop. Right? This is for the roof of the fairy house. But so one of these little plant doodles is roughly, depending on the filament spool, it's about the same size as the hole in the middle, right? So my theory is, and we're going to test it with this once I'm done, is dig out a little bit in your garden, stick the filament spool in the ground, bring your ground cover or whatever up around here, stick your plant in here. What that does is your plant, of course, can grow the roots down into the soil underneath. The weeds can't get to your plant because they can't get through the plastic. They would have to go up and around, and hopefully you would catch them before then. And so then your ground, just the top here would have ground cover. There's not actually any soil here, just ground cover, like your mulch or whatever. So it's really hard for the weeds and things to get up to your plant. And especially like with this, it's a ground cover plant, so it'll grow up and over here. And if you did a couple of them together with a bunch of these spool holders, then you're really limiting the ability for the weeds to get to your plants. I don't know. It was an idea, and we're going to see if it works. This is just a random one, but I'll throw that aside. So what I did is I cut this one because, so the plan here is going to be to take this guy. I'm going to glue it right here, glue it down onto the flat part of this. And then I'm going to actually do some standard typical diorama building techniques to build up the sides on here. I'm going to get to that in a minute. And then paint all this. And so basically it's the same idea that I just described, using this as a planter, except that it's going to have the front exposed right at the edge of the garden. So this will be right at the edge of the garden, you know, and then our garden wall is here. And then the plant will come up and grow over, and, you know, we'll keep it out of the way of the door. But so this is going to be the proof of concept of growing plants in the filament holder while also making a fairy house for Hazel. I'm going to use this gel super glue. By the way, this isn't product placement. This is actually a little trick. So these Loctite super glue things, it doesn't matter what kind of glue it is. Any of the Loctite ones that come in this little squeeze bottle thing, I really like the gel control ones. I actually do like the glue that comes in here. This is what we use for putting the screws and everything in our helmets. But once this is done, if you actually pop this out of here, put the cap on here just in case I squeeze it too hard. I don't want it to splooge goo everywhere. Glue everywhere. So if you pop this out, it's basically like one of those toothpaste squeezers, but for glue. And look inside here. It is just a little, it's one of those little bottles of super glue. So if you like the way these work, once you're done with this, if you also have, like, you can buy one of those packs of like the little tiny tubes that come in like bulk, and you stick it in here, and then you can use this applicator for your other super glue. They're pretty cool. So yeah, actually first I'm going to glue this together. Probably the best place to start. Doesn't fall apart. And yeah, so the door and the rocks were printed on, I want to make sure this doesn't fall apart. I'm going to get it all around here. These are printed on our Elegoo Mars. They're resin prints. I figured that would be, I originally was like, yeah, I'm just going to do a quick print on the FDM printer. But then I was like, well, it's going to be outside in the sun, and like, it's not like full sun all the time, but it's going to get hot enough out there that I don't want to do all this work and put it out there and then come back the next day and it's like a melted pile of... Oh! Off to a great start! I'm getting kind of to the point where, for the most part, I like making stuff for other people more than I like making it for myself. Especially because... you know, ADHD brain. I can only work on something so long before I get distracted by something else and want to move on, which is fine for my own stuff. But of course, for customers, that doesn't work. which is actually one of the big reasons why I actually realized that I should try and get diagnosed in the first place, because I didn't really know. I just thought I sucked, honestly, is what it comes down to. And then there's so, like, I've mentioned this a little bit before. There's so many people that do this that have ADHD, and like talking to them and stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe I should talk to somebody about that, because that sounds way too familiar. One of the things that is always amazing to me is how many times, like, since I started doing prop making and costume making, that something comes up and it's like, oh, I never thought to use that for this, but it's something that I've used before, and like how much crossover there is with other things. So specifically, if you all don't know what these are basically plaster bandages. I know Alan knows these intimately because he cut like a ton of these when we were molding my head. And so it was funny to me that when we went to do the life casting of my head and then my arm too at Chad's, that he broke these out, because I've used these a million times, but not for molding and casting. I use them for diorama making. So especially if you're doing like a big diorama, one of the easiest ways to build up your base landscape is you basically figure out your box or platform size, and then you can take foil or like craft paper, kind of ball it up and get your levels, and then you take this stuff. And the way this stuff works is, if you've never used this rolled plaster, you cut it. You can cut it or use it, whole, whatever. You dip it in water and get it wet, and then all of this white stuff that looks kind of like mesh is actually plaster. And so you get it wet, and then you can form it to things, and it dries really quickly. So you can really quickly build that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to kind of build up the edges on here and close it off a little bit. But yeah, so it was just, I was like, oh, I've used that so many times, and here it is being used in something that I never would have like thought of. What I'm going to do is I'm probably going to cut this way. And let's see. So I'm going to go with, I'm going to cut these in half the other way too. And you can basically cut this in any way, size, shape you want. And so you just dip it in water, which you can't see because the water's over here. I'm going to move this over here. So you dip it in water, which I did. And then what you want to do is you just take your two fingers over here. Nope, I can't do it over there either. There we go. You take your two fingers and you just go, because you don't want it to be too wet, and you kind of just wring it a little bit. And you can see, I'm going to just try and show you, like it starts to close up the mesh because the plaster is water soluble. And then you kind of you can fold it and roll it and do all kinds of things. So I'm just going to seal this edge on here a little bit, and you can see maybe when I push on it, the mesh kind of goes away, right? And it closes it all in. So I'm going to do is I'm going to just, right now I'm working on just sealing this edge. And when I push in this, it actually, because it's so thin, because it's the fabric, that's also what helps it be strong once it then re-dries, is that it has this mesh fabric that's encapsulated in it. So it actually makes a really rigid structure when it's all done. And while it's still wet, the more you can kind of smear it around and smudge it and flatten it out. And you can see the ridges in here. This is how much it can conform to things. You can actually see the ridges of the spool holder. It's a little bit harder to see over here, but like I'm actually making it kind of conform into the rocks on the 3D print even. And it dries pretty quickly, so you don't really even have to wait that long before you can do. And you can do you can build up layers on it so that it gets stronger, and you can like right now I'm using just the cut edge, so I don't have the flat edge, and I'm not gonna do a ton, but like I can kind of roll this up if I want and do something like this, and it'll make like a little bump there if you were doing like an actual diorama. Versus I don't care too much about this top part just because this is all going to get covered with mulch once it goes in the garden. Mostly I'm just smoothing it as much as possible so that it sticks as much as possible. I am going to seal this whole thing when it's all done because, like I said, it's going to be in the weather, and the last thing I want is for it to just all fall apart, which it might anyway. That's okay if it does. Let's make another one or make something else. So I have that base on there, and you can see if I go over here, this is already starting to get, I guess you can't really tell, but this part that was wet and hanging down, like you can see if I lift it up, it's kind of, it barely droops back in because it's already hardening. And so what I'm going to do over here is then I'm going to take the next piece, bring it out. I'm going to actually tip this up, and so I'm going to stick this on the side over here and then wrap it back up here on the top. And pull that tight. Kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm going to smooth this out to get that all in there. And just fill in the cracks here a little bit. And now I'm getting my hand in here to kind of smooth the first piece and the second piece together to thicken that up, and build this up into a kind of a wall here on the side. So there you go. I got the little side there. And then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing on the other side with this other piece. And again, put this over top. Now, scoot this over a little bit more so you guys can see better. Sorry, falling off the table. Tip this up. There we go. Gonna lay this down here. Smooth out the bottom. Get it a little tight, and then again, I don't know how well you can see this part, but as I run my fingers over it, it kind of fills in all the grid and everything. The other thing you can do is you can get, like, if you have plaster of Paris, you can also build up on top of that. Like this part for this specifically is going to get mostly covered by actual like rock and dirt outside, so I'm not terribly worried. I'm trying to make this have a little bit of a front on it that's uniform. That's why I'm kind of trying to build this up a little bit on the front. So here we go. We're getting there. We're getting there. And because it dries so well and it's just air dry, like even like with just like a hair dryer, you can just even on cool, but like on low, you can hit this and it'll help it dry easier. If you have a heat gun, you can do that too, but that might be a little too aggressive. All right, so we're getting somewhere now. There we go. There's the little thing. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut some more of this and actually build up a little bit of, let's see, I'm going to do this. Yeah, and then I'm going to do that. Okay, so this piece, also when you're working with this stuff, I had the roll sitting right here, which is between where I'm going and the bucket of water. Don't do that. the last thing you want to do is like spill a bunch of water on that, because then you're going to have a big hard cylinder of plaster that is useless. So like I was saying, even though these are flat sheets, you can like do all kinds of crazy stuff with them. So like what I'm going to do right here is I'm actually going to kind of roll this up and kind of pull it up and just blend it into the top here and give this a little bit of extra dimension, since the door that I printed is not quite the same size as the spool holder. So there's kind of this weird bump in here. So I'm going to just do that to kind of fill in and give it a little bit of a ridge, so it's coming down a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. Oh, and that's another thing is, like, this is, you can't really see on the camera, but it's kind of a little extra wet. I didn't wring it out as good as I probably should have. So you can actually just take like a paper towel and just do this too, to soak up a little bit of that extra moisture. And that'll actually help with it drying faster too. It also helps with, you can also use it to kind of push it in the cracks and stuff more too. There we go. Cool, okay. And then, so the next thing I'm gonna do is, I think, let's see. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna take another little piece here, and I'm just gonna actually kind of just slap it right in here. And so this is where it starts getting kind of cool to play with this stuff, because you can kind of do all kinds of weird stuff like that, and it'll dry like that. You can see I'm trying to just, yeah, I want it to be a little bit more in there. There we go. Yeah, just something like that. I feel kind of like this. I feel a little Bob Rossy when I'm doing this sort of thing. Oh, now just make the little pretty cool little tree thing. And I'm going to leave it just like that. That side's done. So I'm going to take and do kind of the same thing on the other side. And again, like I said, oh, can you hear the puppy? I don't know if you guys can hear him. He's pretty cute, I have to say. That was a good decision to get a puppy finally. But yeah, so just again, I'm just gonna kind of flop this in here randomly, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Say hi to Daddy. Say hello.
Pooper. Hi, baby. Hi, Ro. Oh, here he comes. All right, who wants to see the puppy? I know it's what you all came for, right? You're just waiting for him to show up on camera, aren't you?
Hi, everybody.
There he is.
Oh,
There's the pupper.
what's your pupper do?
Hi, baby. Oh, you get daddy kiss?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
No mouth. No mouth.
No tongue. No tongue.
It's always tongue with him, but just not my tongue. That's.
Ew. What's Daddy doing?
Daddy making stuff.
You good boy.
Here we go. Just like I said. Just happy little trees. Oh, wait, what?
There are no mistakes, just happy little accidents.
Oh yeah, that's it. The happy accident. What's that?
I don't know. It's got your name on it.
Oh, it's got my name on it. Cool.
Christmas.
So, and I don't know if you can't really hear it, but
I guess this is for yours.
oh, yeah, that's for me. Yeah.
Speaking
See?
of Sheikah slaves.
That was fabric like 2 minutes ago, and now it's hard. This stuff is awesome. I love it. Now I think what I'm gonna do next is, what do we have over here? I think I'm gonna go with this stuff. Yeah. This is just a raw umber. And I'm going to do, so one of the, what I usually use for the base paint on something like this that's plaster is a sponge brush, just because it's easier. So I'm gonna squirt out a bit of this. This paint, it's Sennelier brand, which you would think would mean that this is super expensive, but it's actually not as expensive as you thought. It's also super thick. I don't know if you noticed, like I squirted that out and like it's still tube shaped from the tube that it came out of. So it's super thick, which is good because then you can thin it out with water and it goes a lot longer. I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna sponge this all on here. Well, that's a lot darker than I was expecting it to be. I don't know what I was thinking. But that's okay, because what I can do, I can mix in some other stuff. Make it all kinds of random colors, which also works. These are like my go-tos. My raw umber, yellow ochre. And these, for this stuff, like these are just like super cheap paints. Burnt umber. Because you don't really need much. There we go. Get some variety in there. And again, this is mostly going to get all covered eventually, but I don't want, for anything that's not covered, I don't want white sticking out, because why would I want white sticking out? It would not look good at all. The sponge is nice because it gets into all the little nooks and crannies of the plaster pretty nicely. See, it's getting all in there. And as per usual, I did not get enough paint out, but that's okay. I got enough for the top, and then I can move on to the rest. And the other nice thing with the sponge is, especially where I'm kind of going onto the rocks of the print that's already kind of painted, I can blend it a little bit easier. I forgot I have this too. What is this? Oh, this is a lot thinner already. Put some of that on there. Get in those nooks and crannies. This one that I'm putting on now is not quite as opaque as the other paints, so it won't completely cover the other paint. It'll soak in there and let the other colors still shine through a little bit, give it some more depth. There's that word again. When you are painting, if you ever are doing any of this plaster type stuff, when you're painting on it, because it the way that it works obviously is with water, you want to make sure you don't get it too wet from your paint at any given time. So kind of do a little bit and let it dry before you go back and put too many coats on it, because you don't want it to stay wet and damp in there for an extended period of time. There we go. It's blending in there. So I'm actually using the flat unused part of the sponge to just kind of wipe that edge there and help it blend in a little bit without having like a stark contrast between the two. I'm going to open these doors a little bit if I can. See if I can get in here with this on that little bit of let's see, get me some of this stuff. It's a little bit darker. A little bit of water. And get in here on this little lump I put in here for my doorstop. This is why I mentioned earlier getting crappy brushes out for this, because if there's something where I can't get in there, little nooks and crannies with the sponge, I can use a crappy brush and just kind of slap it around. That didn't really come out right, but you know what I'm talking about. All right. Let's see, a little bit of white sticking out there. So there's the top part, and turn around, see the door, and look, they don't fall in, and you can't see the plaster I put there because I painted it. So then, let's see, I'm gonna go back to and do some more of this stuff, and a little bit of, there we go, the really, really cheap black craft paint. This is the dollar store stuff, and I'm not talking like $1 per tube. I'm talking like $1 for a 4-pack of acrylic paint. Can't even see the label anymore, but these are from the dollar store. It comes with a black, like, I think it was a black, a white, a red, and a yellow or something like that, and it's like, it's literally $1 for 4 of these, and they're great for stuff like this where you're literally just mixing and slopping around paint for like weathering and stuff, because it doesn't need to be great paint to just wash over something. Again, get in all of the nooks and crannies with this stuff. Oh, I made too many crannies. I can't get in there with the sponge brush. Come on, get in there. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get the brush for that. The other brush. So, trying to... Oh, see you later, Alan. I was just about to say, I'm trying to make more of a schedule for streaming. And so, like, part of it's tricky because I have to figure out, like, there are certain days of the week that I don't ever have the kids, which is an easy, like today. So that's an easy day to, like, schedule a stream. But then some days they alternate week to week, whether they're here or not. So that's a little bit more difficult because I don't want to put something on the schedule. Like, the Twitch doesn't let you say, like, make like alternating week schedules or anything like that. It's just your schedule is your schedule. So for weeks where the kids are here, I can't really put something on the schedule and say, like, oh, every other week. You can't do that. So I'm trying to, at the very least, put on the schedule stuff that I know will be every week. That doesn't necessarily be the only things on there. So what I set up was that on Wednesdays I put a block from 2 to 4, and I didn't think I was gonna actually go that long, but it looks like I probably will today. So I put a block from 2 to 4 on Wednesdays, and then for doing this kind of stuff, just hanging out, working on whatever random crap in the shop, and then I set up a block for Thursday nights, so tomorrow night at 6:30. Where I'm actually not going to be in the shop for that stream. I am going to be upstairs on the computer, and we'll see how this goes because I've never done this before, but I'm going to do some like 3D modeling and templating and stuff like that I do on the computer. So I'm going to be doing 3D modeling and then also just talking about like some of the stuff with like how I research some of the stuff that I do for 3D modeling and template making. I'm definitely going to be doing 3D modeling tomorrow night, working on finishing up the Sister Night stuff that we have. So if you are interested at all in Sister Night or the Watchmen TV show, that will probably be interesting to you because I'm not just going to be streaming working on the 3D modeling program. I'm also going to be talking about the props that we're making and like the symbolism and stuff that I've found out and like some of the research that I did on it, because of course it's impossible to just make something without like doing a deep dive into what it means and a bunch of other stuff, because, you know, again, ADHD brain. Plus I like, for me, that stuff's fascinating, and hopefully it'll be fascinating for other people too. And so, yeah, so that's going to be tomorrow night. But so every Thursday night, that's going to be my goal, is to kind of do that sort of thing, where whether it be 3D modeling or making templates or whatever. And then while I'm working on that, talk about some of like the research and everything else that goes into how I make things real. Obviously, Sister Night is a little bit easier as far as how I make it real because it's already real. But like, how do we decide what something looks like in real life that is fake or magic or, that's actually one of my favorite things to do is figuring out like something from, especially from animation. Video games are getting so realistic at this point that it's, for the most part, that it's pretty easy to that most of them are pretty easy to translate to real world. There's still a lot of like defying physics and things that make it challenging. But for the most part, like you don't have to figure out like the basics of something from a video game. Like the Breath of the Wild isn't as realistic, so the Sheikah Slate is a little bit different. And like I'll have to, because I'm making it from my daughter's tablet, I'll have to figure out, what things I need to change and tweak to make it more realistic. But like for animation and stuff, especially depending on the animation, but in general, animation stuff is pretty far removed from reality. And you can't usually see like textures of fabric and materials. So you kind of have to figure out, okay, well, if this was realistic, then what would it look like? Would it be linen? Would it be polyester? Is it leather? All that kind of stuff. And another thing that happens a lot in animation is that things aren't consistent because different people draw it on different episodes. Things change over time. And so one of my favorite ones is somebody was asking me to I didn't actually end up making this, but it was somebody wanted a quote for a sword, one of the swords in Voltron. This is like a couple years ago when Voltron was super popular and before everybody kind of gave up on it. But that is not what I wanted. Sometimes it happens. But so when somebody asks for a quote for something, like, the first thing I do is I go and I get reference pictures and kind of figure out the baseline idea of what it's made out of, what size it is, stuff like that. And so there's this one scene in particular that the sword is in. I think it might have been something Lotor was using or somebody else. But anyway, so in the scene, like the sword comes out and you like, if you look at it in proportion to just like the guy holding it, it's like, okay, that looks like it's about 3.5 feet long. And then like you go to the next scene and it's like, oh, actually maybe that's like 4.5 feet long. And then like a couple scenes later, like it gets like knocked out of his hand, it's laying on the ground, someone's standing there and it looks like it's about 2 feet long. So it's like, okay, so it can't be 2 feet, 3.5 feet, and 4.5 feet all at the same time. So how long am I gonna, like, what size am I actually gonna make this? So what I'm doing here is I made a really watered down dark brown paint that I'm just slapping on all of this. And the reason I'm doing that is this is a wash. And what you're gonna see is, oh look, I made everything all ruined. Everything's just dark brown. Yep. Dark brown everywhere. But like I said, it's really watered down, so you can actually see if I go like this. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a paper towel and go like this on here. You can see, bam. And already that door, the wood grain and stuff, well, you can't really see it on the camera as well as I can in person, but at least the big cracks you can see on camera. There's actually wood grain on the door, on the wood panels. So doing this, it gets that darker paint down in all the nooks and crannies and crevices, and then leaves the high parts, the base color that is lighter. But brings out, see that? Bam! Pop those rocks right out of there, but you can still see the green and the brick color that I mentioned earlier in there. So then, next, what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna soak this up some. I don't want all this wet stuff on here. Your paper towel that you use to wipe stuff off is actually great for painting things too. Alright, so that's that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this yellow ochre again. I'm going to put a little bit over here. I'm going to take my spongy brush again. And, oh, there's a lot of paint in here still. I'm going to get most of the paint out of here, actually. And as you can see, I'm not cleaning these brushes much. And the reason for that is because I kind of like the mix of paint. So I just kind of got that on there a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go on here and hit the top edges a little bit with this. A little bit more. And you can see it's like totally, I'm just kind of going randomly on here and just doing this. And because these rocks are so craggy, it just like hits and picks up little corners and things here. So again, it just, you really can't see it on the camera. But once this is all like all the way done, I'm going to take it out and install it and take pictures and post them up. But so you can see though that it's adding some more depth and stuff to it. A little bit more there. And do the same thing over here on this, even though it's mostly going to get covered. I just don't like solid color anything. See if you can see that. Oh, you can see a little bit how I hit the highlights on those with the mixed paint. It just gives it a little bit of variety and texture to it. A little bit more. And because I didn't completely wash the brush, it has a little bit of that dark brown still kind of embedded in there. And so it's not making it like, if it were just the yellow by itself, it would be pretty bright. Yeah, so. Oh, I hit a spot that I didn't smear it very good, but yeah, so there we go. And you can kind of dab some too to give you a little bit of pops of color. That's one of the things I like doing too, is like if you do dabs, not dabbing, dabs, and get like some globs of paint, then you can go back in like with the side of the sponge brush and kind of just, and it's almost like, think about like putting on makeup, right? Or you like doing contouring and blending it in for people who do makeup. I suck at makeup, but I watch the videos and it's amazing how similar some of these things are. But so just doing that little dabbing on there, and all of a sudden it makes it so it doesn't stand out as much, but you can still see that little bit of color change there. And it blends it in, but gives it some extra depth. There we go. There we go. And what the heck, we'll do some up here too, just for the heck of it. Not that part actually matters for this, but there we go. There's our door, and there's our rock face to either side of it. It's all kind of blended in. Okay, so that part's done. If you think about the actual landscape and turf, you have a few layers, right? You have your soil, and then grasses and weeds and other stuff, right? So it's very much not uniform. So when you're putting on like these turfs and soils, so there's different kinds of soil and grass. Like here's like earth, here's soil which is darker. Here's a little bit of like the fine rock. Then there's like clumps of foliage. There's like dead grass. There's burnt grass. There's a green blend of grass. So there's all these different colors because if you go out and look at your lawn, unless you have fake grass, there's 100 shades in your lawn. So to get this stuff on, there's a couple of things you can do. Most of the places that sell the diorama stuff, they have spray glue already that you can use. The spray glue is basically just watered down white glue though, which Mod Podge is also basically watered down glue. So if you have Mod Podge, which we have plenty of, this thing is as big as my head in case you were wondering what the scale of this giant tub is. So if you have Mod Podge and you have an extra spray bottle, you can put it in there, and depending on how old your Mod Podge is and what kind of, whether it's been exposed to it, might be thicker or thinner, but you can thin it with a little bit of water so that it'll come out of a squirt bottle. And that's what this is. This is just Mod Podge watered down a little bit so it'll squirt. Or you can get like the actual spray Mod Podge. This stuff though is a bit more expensive, obviously, because it's in a pump bottle and everything else. But this is a little bit better than this as far as just fine control. So if you're doing something small like this, the little bottle is probably better. If you're doing like a big diorama, like if I was doing something for like a Gundam Moloch or something, then the big one is great. So now I'm gonna just go back over this, right? And then I'm gonna get the other, where'd the other dirt go? The earth, fine turf. And same thing, sprinkle this on here. Well, I did too much. That's okay. Like I said, it's been a while. And so there we go, building up another layer. And then again, I'm gonna try and, there we go. Not quite as much. And then you just start blending your grasses. So I'm gonna do a little bit of burnt grass, little bit of yellow grass. Whoa. You can also put these like into if you have like an extra like salt and pepper shaker or something, that'll help with like blending it. I'm gonna get a really loose brush here. And the thing with this stuff though is that it's, if you can see it on here, it's kind of, it's dimensional, right? Versus like whatever else. So there we go. That's pretty good. Spray a little bit more on here, and the spraying will actually hold down the layer underneath it too. Let's see. That's the burnt grass again. Where's the? Here we go. Green blend. Let's see if I can do this a little bit better this time. Let's scoot this back a little bit so you can see a little better. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. And a little bit of, and doing with the brush, I'm just doing really, really, really gently, and it helps it actually, because it has the glue on the stuff, it'll help it kind of clump up a little bit here and there and make more clumps. But so, and then the glue, of course, it's white glue, so it dries clear. So you can see there's all this depth of coloration in there. And so now we can do the same thing on the front and the sides. I got some drips on there, but that's okay. So again, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna stand up actually. So get a little bit of, here we go. Now I'm getting the hang of it again. A little bit of that. A a little bit of the other soil. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I'm going to flip over to the other side. So I kind of see as I do this, it builds up that layering. And on these sides, what I'm going to do once I have, so now I have the soil, so I'm going to spray it again, and I'm going to spray the front too, actually. I'm going to spray that, and I'm going to do this next part holding it like this because I want it to kind of stick just on the top versus the flat surface here. So to give it that depth of, stuff is growing down on here, not necessarily in the shady parts because, stuff grows differently in the shade versus the sun. So a little bit of the yellow grass, and then a little bit, this is the green blend again, and I'm going to do extra at the top, and again from this angle so it kind of falls down. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to get some of this off the door because I don't want as much on the door. I want some on there because this is a fairy garden, right? It's been out in the woods, so it should have some stuff growing on the doors, but not quite as much as on the rock that doesn't get touched or moved quite as often. But I want some in there, especially in the nooks and crannies. We're going to have some grass and moss growing. So you can see all of a sudden there's some stuff growing on there. But since I came down from the top, down in here, there's not as much stuff. It's mostly just on the top. And again, with the brush, like if I want, you can kind of brush off if there's too much here or there anywhere. And then the other thing, so that's with just the basic core stuff. Now what I'm also going to do is in these little cracks, I'm going to spritz a little extra in here. And then I'm going to I have these little rocks. That's maybe a little more than I bargained for. That's okay because I can blend it because I have smaller stuff that I can blend it with. And then I'm going to take some of the earth and kind of get up in here from the bottom side to help blend in inside those nooks and crannies on the bottom, on the underside of some of this. Do that over here too, so that matches kind of. Look at that. Looks like it's been out there growing for a while, right? The other thing, and then if we want to get, I'm going to do I'm going to get really close in here because I want to, too much glue. That's okay. It'll dry. So now I have this stuff, which is really cool. This is like the big clumps of foliage. So you can see when I pull this out, it's actually pretty glumpy. So I'm going to stick, this is where you get a little bit more directed. So I'm going to put some stuff in these nooks and crannies like it's growing in there. And whatever tool you need to get in wherever you need. Stick that in there. And because this is dark green, but most of mine is not that dark, I'm going to go over it just a little bit with some of this to blend it in more. There we go. There we go. So now I got those little clumps growing in there. Go back to the other side, same thing. Yep. Make sure I'm not going to spray myself in the face. Same thing. Stick some in there. Just in the cracks where like something would have maybe taken root and started growing in there, you know? Seattle moss, whatever. We all know what that looks like, right? Oh my gosh. That was something I was not prepared for moving here from California, is moss. We don't have that. And yeah, my favorite part about doing this is like, sometimes you're like, because like if I just stopped right there, I'd be like, oh, yeah, that doesn't really blend in very well. But that's the nice part about, you know, you going back to the whole layering in depth, you know, sprinkle a little bit of that on top of it, and all of a sudden, it isn't like such a stark contrast with everything else. That piece just doesn't want to stay, does it? There it goes. And that's the nice thing too with the Mod Podge is literally like you can just soak this, and you actually kind of want to, when you're all done, you want to just kind of do a coat over the whole thing, so that it kind of locks it all in and nothing will fall off. I'm actually going to take a little. This is the coarse turf. It's a little bit in between the other things, but I'm going to put. I want to get a little bit of this stuff in the rocks from the print, just because I think that is, and kind of get it into the crevices where the stuff would really stick. And you know, you can use your finger too. It's all good. All right, so I'm gonna try to brush some of this down. So I think the nice thing is you can scoop up the stuff that you threw on that you dropped on the ground, kind of put it back on with the brush. Just gonna stick in some of this on the bottom here. Spurts that a little bit. Just getting a little bit here. Or a little bit on the bottom edge. A little bit of green. A little bit of yellow. Here we go. There we go. Look at that. So it's all blended in. Where I had those globs of glue with kind of white highlights, but that'll come out later. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, considering, you know, I just started it at 2 o'clock.